I think it's fair to say that Edge's return at the 2020 Royal Rumble is going to be one of the best moments in Royal Rumble history for a long old time. Just the amazing surprise of it all, his reaction, them missing his first spear, you know, it was just perfect. And my experience of it was that happened, and it was a really enjoyable Rumble, and then I went off on my honeymoon and I came back in time for WrestleMania, and the pandemic had happened, but it was still WrestleMania. It was really exciting, and he'd got into it with Randy Orton, and Randy Orton attacked his wife, etc, etc. Everyone couldn't wait to see Edge versus Randy Orton at WrestleMania 36, and then we had to sit through 37 minutes of it. There was the, let's be honest, very ill-advised spot with the weight equipment, etc, but it was just so dull. Nothing happened. They just trudged through. You know, it was a very surreal experience, obviously, that WrestleMania. I thought it had the
intensity of a really good fight, but
it's a very surreal experience, that whole WrestleMania, of course, because of the, you know, circumstances we were in. And at that time, you were looking for any escape. And I found myself during this match going, you know what, I'm just going to check the R number again, see what's going on there, because that's more interesting than this piece of trash. 37 minutes! That's more than obviously the main event and the other main event that happened again and then was on the Raw of the next night or whatever. It's more than about 4 or 5 matches on that card combined. It was bonkers, and it was so bad, Michael Sidgwick, they had to put on the greatest wrestling match ever.
So from 37 minutes to 18 goddamn seconds. I was at this WrestleMania 28, my very first ever WrestleMania live experience. Obviously super excited going in. Like, actually looked like a pretty decent card. Obviously there was some, like, well, there was a Big Show match in there. But, but like, Undertaker in the Hell in a Cell, the main event, John Cena versus The Rock, was been doing for a bloody year. And Daniel Bryan versus Sheamus, which should have been a match where two guys just go out and kick the absolute crap out of each other, and it'd be absolutely brilliant. But they gave it 18 seconds. Now I've come to have a weird, like, sort of, I guess, like, it changed how Daniel Bryan's career went from that point on. Like, it became the catalyst to the Yes movement and things like that. But that was not their intention. No. Let's not pretend otherwise. This was just for them to bury Daniel Bryan on the biggest stage of all. It should have been an absolutely incredible match. The fans going into that place loved him. Like, just walking to the arena, there was Yes chants. And this was well before all the Yes movement stuff. Everybody was there to see Daniel Bryan have a hell of a match, and he kisses AJ Styles, gets bro kicked in the face, and is down for 18 seconds, and everyone in that building was pissed. The mood disappeared from the live crowd completely. Everybody was just like, what the absolute f*** is that? That is absolutely pathetic. But everything was okay, I guess, because here comes Kane!
No. WrestleMania 35, these morons kicking off towards the end of the show. It's an 8-hour pay-per-view for full context. If you go onto WWE Network and you look at the raw video file, it's going to be about 5.5, but you take into account that the pre-shows also had matches on at this point, it's another 2.5. Keep also that we were there in person, and you know, that's a great honor and a privilege to be able to do this job. That is not lost on me before anyone fires off. But the problem with WrestleMania 35 was the extreme bloat of the show. It's not just the 8-hour runtime, it's the fact that once the show peaks emotionally with Kofi Kingston's win, you still have complete nonsense involving the US title and the Roman Reigns comeback match in which he inexplicably got booed, which was extremely uncaring and weird and uncomfortable to be around. You had the crap Baron Corbin Kurt Angle match. There's just a load of absolute filler on this 15-match show that didn't need to be there. Well, I was sitting next to you, Michael Sidgwick, in this cold as balls stadium in our very good seats, waiting for just the main event to come around, for Becky Lynch's coronation to come around. And you're sitting there, a match finishes and you go, hey, it's next. Oh no, here's Bobby Lashley. Oh, it's up next, surely. Here's Samoa Joe. It's up next, surely. Oh no, it's Alexa Bliss. But that's okay, she's hosting the show, so she's only coming out to announce the attendance. This will take 2 seconds, it's totally fine. She announces the attendance, and it's a very high number that isn't inflated whatsoever. But she doesn't piss off. she introduces these two complete buffoons to come out for a dance break. I believe the exact phrasing was something along the lines of, "I think it's just about time for a dance break." And I was like, no, brother, it's time for me to go home. Not only that, but these pricks didn't even have the decency to wrap this thing up in 7 seconds, which was the whole gimmick. They prated about for about a whole, I don't know, minute, but it felt like an hour. To me in my life. This moment opened up a hole in my soul that has never closed. I am a quarter of the man I was before WrestleMania 35, and it's down to this crime against humanity.
How do you pick a WrestleMania moment that drove you crazy from so many WrestleMania moments that could drive you crazy? Just go with the first thing that comes to mind, right? So for me, for whatever reason, it's Brock Lesnar versus Dean Ambrose at WrestleMania 32. One of the worst WrestleManias ever. Not just the actual show itself, but the build to it was pretty bad. And I think this is standing out for two reasons. One is an anecdote, which I'll get to, but the other one is because it was a bright spark, right? Everything else was kind of a dirge of boring and terribleness in WWE at this period, where it was kind of like, do you know what? Lesnar versus Ambrose could be something entertaining. It could be, you've got Big Boss Lesnar, who's 2 years removed from doing the streak stuff, and then Ambrose, who is fairly over as a babyface at this point. So maybe that's something cool. And I remember having a conversation about this match on a train with my housemate to the point where we nearly missed our stop because we were excited about what this could be. And then the show rolls around, of course, and it's not really anything, is it? Brock Lesnar failed to put in any effort, didn't really care about doing anything with Ambrose. And Ambrose, I think he tries, bless him, but you can kind of tell that he knows that it's not working, and it's 13 minutes of bad, no holds barred / bad match regardless of stipulation, which, yeah, out of a pretty bad card, this was something that could have at least been something good, and it wasn't that. It was bad.
There was a realisation that Hulk Hogan was a it's something that I think most people have ever interacted with him, either from a distance like we have, or maybe close up to him, have realised over time. Many of his co-workers thought, many of his friends seem to think it based on what books you read. However, for me, it was as an 8-year-old boy that at this point knew wrestling wasn't on the up and up. I was given the business on the business quite early on when I asked my dad, why are they not bruising? And he said, it's because it's not real, son. And I was like, okay, and I went back to watching it again, and everything was fine. But time moved on. Hogan moved on, and there was Bret Hart. And I loved Bret Hart more than I'd ever loved Hogan, or especially Warrior. Bret was my guy now, and I didn't need to worry about anything else. Another WrestleMania was as good as in the books. The Caesars Palace car park had never looked better. I realised I was still watching that pinnacle of the industry, and Bret was fighting Yokozuna. Look, Yokozuna, big guy, big challenging guy. If he's going to beat Bret, fine. There'll be another day for Da Hitman. But he did. And then this guy came out, and I was like, what the hell are you doing here? I didn't want him there. He'd had his tag match. He'd not won that match. He was fine on the mid-card. He was out of the way, you. But all of a sudden, Bret was telling him, with Mr. Fuji's salt in his eyes, to go for the belt. And I was like, no, don't do that, Bret. Just let Yoko keep it and you'll get it back. I was like, I don't know why you're here. You're like ancient. I've been told by WWE he was ancient. And it was the first time as an 8-year-old, I remember thinking, this isn't what I want from the Fed. It was a very jarring experience. Everybody in the Vegas car park was going nuts. It was still Hogan. The music was playing. There he was with the belt that he was synonymous with. And yet, for me as a kid, at my most sort of predisposed to love this, I just thought, you are not doing right by me. Like, thankfully, 3 decades passed and they've never done wrong again. But this one night just sort of pulled the rug away in a way that, like, I've vividly remember as a child just like pressing stop on the tape and going, oh, well, that's, the hero didn't win at all. This guy did. That guy there with the hole in his head from the jet skis. The jet skis. Yeah, I get a bit hungry looking at him even now. Piece of garbage.
So what WrestleMania moment drove me absolutely insane, I hear you ask? Well, for me, it was something that went down at WrestleMania 37. It was night 2 of Mania 37. The first night had been all kinds of emotional, really, because we I know it sounds quite dramatic now, but at that point in time, we didn't know when we were ever going to actually see live fans in front of wrestling again. The world had been insane itself for like a year or so, so it was all kinds of moving and just yeah, peculiar seeing that in general. So then when it came to night 2, that emotion was still there. It was like, right, come on, give me some more wrestling. And what did we get to open this show, this second night? Bray Wyatt, the late great Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton. It was obviously the second time this match has ever gone down at WrestleMania. The first one at Mania 33 was a bit infamous, so the bar was set really low, but they still couldn't clear it because after some pretty fascinating entrances, I won't lie, if you look back and watch them today, they're still pretty peculiar and interesting in their own right. The feud itself coming into it was a bit hit and miss, let's be honest, but the match itself was ticking along. It was doing all right. It was all in the stupid red lighting, but we won't talk about that. It was going along just fine, and then out of nowhere, and Alexa Bliss had been in and around the ring before this. She'd done the stupid weird Jack-in-the-Box thing beforehand. She just popped up out of the box, covered in black goo, like putting her hands out, being all strange and just leaking out of her face. The Fiend got distracted, then Randy Orton hit an RKO and won. I don't know if he was the face or the heel. Nobody really knows if the Fiend was the face or the heel. We just know that he got distracted by Little Miss Bliss being all demonic and like crazy. And the entire thing, if this all just feels a bit flat now and a bit like, okay, that's what it felt like in the stadium from the looks of it, because everyone was just looking, going, okay, that was weird. Now what? What's going to be the big angle? And then nothing. They just stared at each other for a little bit and then disappeared. All the lights went out, and then when they came back on, they were gone. What about afterwards? Are we going to have a big follow-up, a big interesting thing that goes down on Raw that sets up like a massive feud between the two going forward? No, not really. They both just pretty much went, well, that's us going our separate ways. Peace out. That was it. It was baffling. You literally sat there at home thinking, okay, I've gone from being moved and all emotional from the first night of like, yeah, WrestleMania, and then dragged back down to earth with a thud, with just absolute WWE lunacy, really. Just nonsensical stuff for the sake of stuff, just a shock swerve just for the hell of it. Nobody understood it. It's still to this day, it is incomprehensible what they were actually incomprehensible. See, I can't even get the words out. I'm so confused by what went down. It was the last time that we saw the Fiend character as well, so the whole thing was just a massive waste, a really disappointing waste that infuriated me at the time and still gets me a little bit cross today.
It's 2010. I'm venturing out in terms of my fandom and my interests, but it's still not altogether easy or, you know, cheap to watch everything, and nothing's really big time. And if you want to watch great big time spectacle, loud professional wrestling, it begins and ends in 2010 anyway with WWE. And I was still in that mindset where it's like, it'll always get better. They can't deny such and such performer for this long. They're actually pushing CM Punk, who I was besotted with at the time. He was my absolute favourite wrestler, and I thought, well, if they can't deny him, they can't deny wrestlers like him, and maybe even before the pipe bomb, and we know how that went, this could be the first path towards true change. And I thought, and I was still very much in that mind of, well, if this is a great match with guys in kick pads, this is what I want from professional wrestling, because it was a rarity at the time, especially on that stage. And they announced CM Punk versus Rey Mysterio, and I thought that is the best nerd I like wrestling match you could possibly do at WrestleMania, no less. So I was really excited. My favourite guy, and a guaranteed great match. And the point has been made elsewhere. It is very much true. A great match becomes something even more special against that insane backdrop. I thought I was going to get at least 15 minutes of a, you know, that Savage Steamboat, Michaels Angle tier of just pure bell-to-bell greatness. And they give it like 6 minutes. The work in those 6 minutes was unbelievable. It was an incredible sprint, but I just thought, how is this getting less time than Bret Hart versus Mr. McMahon? So you're taking the piss. I was just like in a really foul mood, and then I went back for 27, and to my shame, every Raw in between, and it was just one of those, I think a lot of WWE fans have got death by 1,000 cuts in terms of how they really went away from it, if in fact they did. And that was like probably the 100th, and then there's so many that followed. so many that followed. 6 minutes for the punker. Kiss my ears.
A WrestleMania moment that drove me insane was when Triple H and The Undertaker were having their back-to-back WrestleMania matches, right? We've done Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, and now we're going to do Undertaker, Triple H, and Undertaker, Triple H. We're going to have the Hell in a Cell. We're going to have one of the best near falls in wrestling history when Shawn Michaels hits a super kick into the pedigree, 1, 2, ooh. Undertaker kicks out. And the whole time, during these double matches, maybe even quadruple matches, although why would you talk about it in the Shawn Michaels ones, we just pretended that WrestleMania 17 didn't exist. Triple H and Undertaker never had a match there, it never happened, 2001 didn't exist, and nobody's allowed to talk about it. And that annoys me for 2 reasons. One, that match was really good. Like, you could argue that was the best of the 3. I mean, I probably don't think that, but it's not a throwaway contest or anything like that. And 2, and who knows how true this is, it's rumors on the internet, the reason I want more people to talk about it is that apparently the reason we did Triple H versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 17 is because Vince McMahon did his card and somebody went, you know you haven't put Triple H on there. It's like, oh, you know you haven't put The Undertaker on there. Oh, and it's like, well, we'll just push them together. That's right. That was the level of depth we went to in 2001 when The Undertaker, American Badass Biker Undertaker, and Triple H were absolutely massive stars. They just were. And the reason they got put on a card is because somebody forgot, so we got to do something. But why on earth did we not talk about that? I don't know, was it 10, 15 years later? It doesn't make any sense to me. It wasn't that long, like 10 years later. But it's absolutely baffling. It doesn't make any sense, and it makes me feel like a goober. I have to go on the internet and go, did this happen? Like some kind of a schmuck. And the internet said, of course it happened. You saw it with your eyes. I stayed up to watch WrestleMania 2001, WrestleMania 17, X7, whatever the flub we're going to call it. But now, in 2024, we have to pretend it doesn't exist. I don't want to pretend it doesn't exist. Look, if those 2 guys don't like that match, that ain't my fault, man. It's in history, and you can't forget history. It's right there in the books, staring at me right in the face. No one needs to get this angry about something so irrelevant, but it doesn't make sense. It's 2 + 2 = potato. And everyone knew as well, it was the elephant in the room, but nobody bothered to address it. I even think, and again, I could be totally wrong, that during one of the matches, they even say this, oh, it's the first or second time these 2 have fought at Mania. No, it ain't, bro. No, it ain't. Why are you lying to my face? You think I tune into wrestling to be insulted? No, I don't. Well, sometimes I do, but that's on me. That's totally my own fault. But don't make me feel like an absolute wally. I follow this stuff, and it's nice to be rewarded. It's the best thing, I suppose, that Triple H has done ever since he did take over, is that people remember things. And things can happen years ago, years prior, and they will be brought up, as opposed to this nonsense, which was just, man, we don't want to talk about it, so we're not going to talk about it. I have enough of that when I go home, and the disappointment of my parents, I don't need it in my pro wrestling too.
It has to be Hulk Hogan somehow walking out of WrestleMania 9 as the WWF champion, despite the main event of that pay-per-view being Bret Hart versus Yokozuna, and Hulk Hogan only having a tag match that night. However, as Michael Hamflet has already covered that perfectly, it's WrestleMania 12 that I'll bring to the table, and more specifically, the sudden death BS that saw Bret Hart once again screwed. You had Bret Hart, you had Shawn Michaels, 60-minute Iron Man match for Bret's world title. The rules are the person with the most victories after 1 hour is the winner, so with 0 falls or submissions apiece at the end of that hour, that should mean Bret Hart retains the world title because he didn't actually lose the match. It was a draw, and the wording of the match never said there had to be any falls or submissions. Now, I love Gorilla Monsoon, one of the iconic voices of my childhood, but not on this night. No, not for me. Having been reinstated as the WWF president that night, and Monsoon decided to go off script, to go into business for himself, to move the goalposts, to change the game, you get the idea. And he had the match continue under sudden death rules. To borrow a phrase from Mr. Perfect, it was bogus. It was absolutely bogus. Of course, Shawn would hit 2 super kicks, win the title, and then even worse, he'd tell Bret to get the flub out of his ring, then refuse to even look at Bret Hart. So yeah, having split up the Rockers, who I loved, having defeated the Bulldog for the Intercontinental title after Davey finally won the singles title, having cut short Marty Jannetty's IT title reign at just 20 days, and now having beaten Bret Hart in the main event of WrestleMania for the world title. All of this was just another step in the beef that young me had with Shawn Michaels. And it's not like I still hold on to that grudge to this very day or anything. Absolutely not. No chance. But away from this, the real answer to the top Mania moment that drove me insane is totally that Hulk Hogan BS from WrestleMania 9. But WrestleMania 12's finale is not far behind.